Hello friends, today I will read History, Chapter 1, Modern Indian History. History is the story changes in our lives. In the last few hundred years, these changes have happened at a much faster pace. On the other hand, history warns us about our lapses in the past and teaches us not to repeat the same in future. As far as the changes in the 20th century are concerned, we have moved from horse carriages to cars to flying aeroplanes and have even explored space. Revolution in communication has brought about a sea change in our day-to-day life. Television, radio, and cinema are new sources of entertainment that have given us access to more and rapid information. The greatest transformation has come after the invention of the computer. It has brought about sweeping changes in all spheres of human activity. The history of most of the countries is divided into three periods: ancient, medieval, and modern. This is done so as to show that the society, economy, politics, and culture or each period is distinct for that span. The modern period in India is said to have started in the 18th century. Some of the characteristic features of modern era include industrialization, rapid progress in technology, growth of cities, and greater interaction among nations. India in the 18th century was in a chaotic political condition. The Mughal Empire, which held the country together for about 3 centuries, had become weak. The country was breaking up into small independent states that constantly fought with each other. This disunity finally led to the colonization of India by the British. As a result, the economic and political progress that took place in Europe reached much later India. In course of time, India too became exposed to these changes, and the modern period began in India from the latter half of the 18th century. Therefore, before we use the study of modern history, it is important to know about the significant events and changes which took place in other parts of the world during this time. Needless to say that these world events had a significant impact of India. The changing trends were first visible in Europe. The changes in Indian history. New education system based on British line was introduced. It influenced the people a great. A westernized new middle class emerged which suited the taste of British class. The British rule started urbanization in modern line. New colonial cities like Bombay, Kolkata, and Madras started to develop. These cities became the centers of economy. Besides, hill stations were promoted by the British during the colonial rule. The British rule and zamindari system changed the peasants, artisans, ruined the handicraft industry of India. With the British rule, new administration laws, revenue based on British model was introduced in India. The purpose of the British rule was to get economic benefits and to drain the wealth of India into Britain. Several legacies of the past reflect in the modern period. The British administration, police system, laws, parliamentary system, rule of the law, Indian judiciary, Indian penal code started to take shape during the British rule. The glorious non-violent struggle of independence under Mahatma Gandhi is a major achievement of this period. A number of groups participated, such as peasants, tribal groups, business community, traders, labor class, etc. Untouchability. Ill treatment of lower castes were criticized. Education of women were supported. Indian social and religious reformers realized importance of social religious reforms and they wanted to get rid of old practices. Laws were passed to improve the condition of the widows. Indian people rose against the unjust caste system based A wide range of the people and groups participated in the movement of India. In the struggle of national movement, the role of the Congress leaders, non-Congress leaders, and revolutionaries in remarkable. Leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, Vipin Chandra Pal, Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, Sardar Patel, and thousands of unknown patriots have left their footprints on the glorious path of Indian national movement. The main sources for the studying of the modern period of Indian history are as follows: administrative government records, literary sources, newspapers, diaries, letters, surveys and census, paintings, photographs, buildings. Sources of information: official records, the most reliable plan of modern period. The British rulers ruled in India with their own culture and norms. They recorded every plan, policy, treaty and agreement. Besides, the British courts in India preserved the decision of the courts. Museum archives were set up by it. Literary sources. Literary sources include the newspapers, diaries, letters, plays, journals, biographies, novels. The newspaper like Hindu, Amrita Bazar Patrika, Kesari were very prominent at that time. These newspapers reflect the criticism of government policies. Novel, essay, poem are to be included. The writing of Rabindranath Tagore and Bankim Chandra Chatterjee in Bengali, Vishnu Sastri Chiplunkar in Marathi, Bhartendu Harishchandra in Hindi and Subramanyam Bharati in Tamil reflect the socio-economic conditions of that period. Survey and census. The British introduced the concept of survey in India. The Office of Survey or was set up in Dehradun, which prepared detailed maps of villages and towns. These surveys and maps give detailed information about the crops, soil and revenue records of India. The British started the practice of census, the counting of population and other information after every 10 years. These census reports gives us detailed information regarding religion, occupation, population growth of India. The Museum of National Archives, New Delhi keeps a vast body of handwritten manuscripts and official administration records of ancient, medieval and modern period of Indian history. Coins. Coins are the sources of information regarding various rulers. These provide us information regarding the economic condition of people. The British East India Company started minting coins from the mid-17th century. In 1770, the British obtained the right to introduce their own rupee in the name of the Mughal emperor. Press and newspapers. Hundreds of newspapers were published in India, not only in English but in regional languages such as Tamil, Gujarati, Marathi, Bengali, etc. In 1876, there were 62 vernacular newspapers in Bombay, about 60 in NWFP, North West Frontier Province, Oudh and Central Provinces, 28 in Bengal and 19 in Madras. Some important newspapers of that period were The Times of India, founded in 1861, The Pioneer, founded in Lahore in 1877, The Tribune, started in Lahore in 1877, The Bengali, founded in 1862 by Surendranath Banerjee, The Amrita Bazar Patrika is founded by Shishir Kumar Ghosh in 1868. These different newspapers give a lot of information about the British rule of India. Thank you. Let's start chapter 2. From trader to master. In the late 18th century, the political condition of India was highly unstable. Aurangzeb was the last powerful Mughal ruler. His death in 1707 marked the beginning of a war of succession for the throne of Delhi. After the death of Aurangzeb in 1707, many Mughal governors and chieftains broke free from the Mughal control and established regional kingdoms. In the second half of the 18th century, many European powers were attracted towards Asia due to the profitable trade prospects. The coming of the Europeans. For long, India's spices, silks, textile, and other items had been in demand in Europe. During the medieval period, the Arabs were the ones who supplied these items to the West. In 1453, Constantinople, the national capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, fell to the Turks, and the Arabs could no longer take goods safely overland to Europe. So, for the Europeans, it became essential to find a direct sea route to the east. For this purpose, a series of voyages were undertaken by European explorers, sponsored by the monarchs of Portugal, Spain, and England. As a result of the discoveries of these voyages, direct trade routes were established between the west and the east. The Portuguese. Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese sailor, first discovered a sea route to India via the Cape of Good Hope in 1498 and arrived at Calicut in Kerala. The Portuguese succeeded in stabilizing their trading centers in Cochin, Goa, Daman and Diu, which they retained till 1961. The Dutch. Affected by the spice markets of Southeast Asia, the Dutch undertook several voyages to the regions. The Dutch undertook several voyages to this region. The Dutch East India Company was formed in 1602. Their important factories were located in Masulipatam, Pulicat, Surat, Karikal, Patna, Balasore, and Cochin. They exported cotton cloths, raw silk, molasses, opium, and indigo from India. East India Company (EEIC). The success of Portuguese in the trade of spices, muslin, silk, etc. with India encouraged English traders to enter this field. It was in 1599 that a few traders known as merchant adventurers made a company to trade with the Eastern world. This company was known as East India Company. East India Company received a charter from Queen Elizabeth on 31 December 1600, which granted it the monopoly of Eastern trade. The company decided to open a factory at Surat on the western coast in 1608. At this time, a diplomatic mission through Sir Thomas Roe was sent to the court of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir with the aim of securing permission of building trading posts in Surat and other areas. In 1615, the East India Company established its first factory in Surat after receiving a farman from Jahangir. Soon trading posts were built in Masulipatam, Agra, Ahmedabad, Madras, Patna and Balasore. In 1662, the EEIC was given the island of Bombay by King Charles II, who had received it from the Portuguese as part of his dowry on marrying a Portuguese princess. The EEIC acquired 3 villages in Bengal, which they unified to form the city of Calcutta. The company established factories at these places, each under the command of a factor or a master merchant. It fortified Bombay, Kolkata, and Madras. The merchants lived inside their forts and did not mingle with the locals except for business. The East India Company tried to maximize its profit from trade with India due to monopoly. To maintain its monopoly, the company used all fair and unfair means such as diplomacy, fraud, and wars with Indian rulers and foreign rivals. The French company named Compagnie des Indes Orientales was formed in 1664. The first French factory was established in India by Francois Canon at Surat in 1668. Further factories were established at Masulipatam, Pondicherry, Mahe, Chandarnagar, Karikal, Bantam, Surat and Mauritius. Trade wars. England and France had been traditional rivals in Europe. Their rivalry also extended to their colonial possessions. It reached its peak during the second half of the 18th century. At the heart of the frequent clashes between the two European powers was the control of colonial possessions. England and France were traditional rivals in the most of the European wars of the 18th century. The conflict of trade interests between them finally ended with the three Anglo-French wars or the Carnatic Wars that were fought from 1746 to 1763 in India. They are called the Carnatic Wars, as most of them were fought in the Carnatic region and other parts of Tamil Nadu. The wars finally resulted in the establishment of the British power in India. First Carnatic War. A war broke out in Europe between France and England. It led to the clashes between the British and the French companies also. It ended in 1748. Consequences of the war were: neither side made any territorial gains. The war exposed the weakness of the rulers of South India. It was shameful that the Nawab of Carnatic could not stop a foreign war in his kingdom. Dupleix, the governor of the French company, was very capable and diplomat. He took advantage of the weakness of the southern states and could increase the influence of the French company. Second Carnatic War. Dupleix interfered in Carnatic and Hyderabad after the death of their rulers. He got success to set up the puppet rulers in these two states as to fulfill the French interests. The British managed to defeat the French plan under the able leadership of Robert Clive of British East India Company and got made Muhammad Ali as the Nawab of Carnatic. The results of the war were: the French government accepted defeat and signed a peace treaty. The British demand to send back Dupleix to France was accepted. This was a big blow to the future of the French company in India. The Second Carnatic War was established the supremacy of the British over Carnatic. Third Carnatic War. With the beginning of war in Europe, the English-French rivalry started and the British could get success in the Battle of Plassey in 1757. The result of Third Carnatic War were: the French dream of building an empire in India was broken. Pondicherry and other French settlements were returned to the French, but they could not build forts or station troops. The French settlements would continue as centers of trade. The British supremacy was accepted. Following factors led to the victory of the British over the French. British naval supremacy, strong financial condition of the British, capable British leadership, British governors free from government control and internal interference. The British first settled in Bengal near Hooghly River. They set up the factory which had a warehouse where goods for export were stored and here officers sat. With the expansion of trade, the merchants started to settle near the factory. After the fortification in the name of security, the next step was to get the zamindari rights over the villages. The company persuaded the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb to issue a farman granting the company the right to trade duty-free, but officials of the company traded individually without paying duties. It caused a lot of loss to the Nawabs of Bengal, Murshid Quli Khan, followed by Alivardi Khan and then Sirajud-Dowla. Causes of tension between the Nawab of Bengal and company. Duty-free trade was causing financial loss to the Bengal rulers. The Bengal rulers stopped the British trader from fortification. The Bengal ruler denied the British to mint the coins. The Bengal rulers denied to give concession and demanded large tributes. Battle of Plassey, 1757. Thank you. Let's start chapter 3, Impact of Imperial Rule on Rural Economy. When the British came to India, villages were self-sufficient units. Most of the things that the villagers needed were produced in the village itself. The farmer owned the land and cultivated. He could not be evicted. During the rule of Shershah Suri, land was measured and pattas given for the first time. Revenue was charged depending on the fertility of soil. You have already read about the Mansabdari system under the Mughals in a previous class. In times of drought or famine, the revenue was reduced or at times even not collected. Although farmers were extremely dependent on the climate and the rains, villages managed to attain a level of self-sufficiency. Sir Charles Metcalfe, a British administrator, called them little republics. There were weekly markets where people gathered to exchange goods. Although irrigation facilities were provided by the rulers, they did not meet the farmers' needs completely. The company as Diwan. During the governorship of Lord Clive in 1765, the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II granted the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa to the East India Company. In return, the company was to make an annual payment of 26 lakh to him. The company therefore appointed two deputy Diwans, one for Bengal and the other for Bihar. The poor peasants were exploited. The harshness or revenue collection forced cultivation to either run away to the jungles or become robbers. Thus, agricultural production declined. Simultaneously, trade and commerce also suffered a setback in Bengal, so the company never got the full amount. The bidding amount also varied from one year to another, resulting in an instability for income for the company. To smoothen the revenue collection mechanism, the company brought about some changes. They introduced three new revenue collection systems: the permanent settlement, the Mahalwadi system, and the Ryotwadi system. Zamindari system or permanent settlement. Lord Cornwallis, then Governor General of India, introduced this system. The landlords of Bengal, Bihar, Odisha were hereditary owners of the land. Landlords had to collect of the land. Landlords had to collect the revenue from peasants and give fixed amount of revenue to the British government. Impacts: the company got a fixed amount on regular basis as the land revenue was fixed at high rate. Many zamindars could not pay in kind. If the landlords did not pay, their landlordship should be terminated. If the crop production increased, the landlords could get profit of increased crops. Most of the zamindars shifted to cities and rented the land to the tenants. They were interested in the income of rent. When the production increased, profit was earned by the landlords. The British government could not get profit as the amount of revenue was fixed. The farmers who actually tilled the land were exploited by the farmers. Farmers had to pay rent to zamindars. The farmers took the land on rent for which they needed loan for the moneylenders. Landlords took advantage of illiteracy of the farmers and occupied their land or mortgages their houses. Ryotwadi system. Ryotwadi system was introduced by Thomas Munro in southern and western India. The cultivators or ryots had to pay rent directly to the British government. There was no middleman between the cultivator and the government in this Ryotwadi system. Though in this Ryotwadi system there were no role of zamindars. The farmers were not exploited by landlords, but the land revenue was very high, which the farmers had to pay directly to the British government. Due to this reason, the farmers had to take loan from the moneylenders. Sometimes the farmer left farming occupation and left that area. Mahalwadi system was introduced by a British officer, Holt Mackenzie, in Punjab, northwest provinces, and Awadh. A group of villages was called Mahal. Each village had village headmen who collected the land revenues and handed to the British government. Impact: powerful landlords donated the poor peasants. Commercialization of agriculture. The British needed indigo, cotton, jute, silk, opium, pepper, tea, and sugar. That is why the Britishers forced the Indian farmers to produce these crops, as it would bring a lot of profit to the Britishers. Opium War. The Chinese government stopped the illegal opium trade. The British declared war against China and tried to smuggle opium produced in India. Need of indigo. The British needed indigo for coloring the cloth. They pressurized the peasants to produce indigo. As a result, indigo cultivation expanded in Bengal and started to move from India. Indigo was in great demand in the world. The British traders allured the farmers by giving them loan in advance. The farmers were forced to cultivate indigo, and in return they got a very low price, and the burden of loan always tied the farmers. Most of the farmers were not interested to cultivate indigo as it was not a food crop. The farmers were most interested in the cultivation of food crops as it could feed the poor family. Moreover, the indigo cultivation affected the fertility of the soil, and the land of Bengal was very unfertile, which was suitable for rice cultivation. Impacts: the British industries and traders got benefit. Indian farmers were exploited. The Indian farmers were trapped in the never-ending loan cycle. The exploitative role of zamindars increased when the farmers were not able to pay high rent of land revenue. They took loan at high rate of interest from the moneylenders, cheated the innocent farmers by forged signature, taking advantage of illiteracy of the farmers. The plantation started in India by the British planters. Famines, drought, flood, crop disease, etc. destroyed the crops. The sufferings of peasants doubled due to heavy land revenue and torture by landlords and moneylenders. It caused poverty, lack of food, and starvation. Thousands of people lost their lives. The peasants started to revolt against the British. Peasants' revolt. The peasants of Kerala, called Moplah, revolted in 1860s due to the burden of taxation. The poor farmers revolted against the rich farmers. In 21, the Muslim peasants revolted against the zamindars. The farmers attacked the moneylenders and zamindar. Due to their exploitative nature, the peasants burnt the account books, looted grain shops, and set their houses on fire. Thank you. Let's start chapter 4, the revolt of 1857 to 58. Lord Canning succeeded Lord Dalhousie as Governor General in 1856. His tenure proved to be a turning point in the history of India. In this chapter, we shall read about the rebellion in the army and the spread of the movement. The process of conquest made virtually all sections of the Indian turn against the British. The rulers were angered by the annexations of their territories and noblemen by the loss of their zamindaris. The craftsmen resented the new trade policies, which exposed them to unequal and hence unfair foreign competition. The peasants could not bear the exploitative system of land revenue administration, and the sepoys detested certain British regulations which hurt their religious sentiments. People expressed their anger through the various protests and revolts. Sepoy revolts. The sepoys too had their own specific grievances, non-existing avenues of the promotion compounded by disparity between the salaries and the differential treatment to Indian and European soldiers were cause of discontentment. There were sporadic mutinies by the company's sepoys as well A sepoy mutiny broke out in Bengal in 1764 and at Vellore in 1806. This was followed by the Barakpur mutiny in 1824. Since none of these mutinies were organized, they were easily suppressed by the British. All the early revolts were localized occurrences. None of them was strong enough to challenge British authority, but they were reflective of the bubbling unrest in society. In such a scenario of sporadic discontent, a mighty all India revolt was only waiting to happen. It finally came in 1857. The Great Revolt, Indian Mutiny. The first real challenge to British authority came in the form of a popular revolt in 1857. It began with a mutiny of the soldiers but was soon joined by all sections of the Indian society. The revolt was a result of the numerous grievances of the people against the oppressive British rule. In order to underplay the importance of the event, British historians refer to it as only a sepoy mutiny, that is one of the most important sepoys involved. However, the revolt was not widespread in areas as well as the involvement of people that it would be appropriate to term it as the first war of independence. The uprising was most widespread over Delhi, Kanpur, Awadh, Rohilkhand, Allahabad, Agra, Meerut, Jhansi and western Bihar. There were more localized uprisings in Assam, Odisha, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Sindh, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Hyderabad, Punjab and Bengal. It was much more than a military mutiny, and it spread rapidly and assumed the character of a popular rebellion and a war of independence. Factors and causes. Economic factors. The most important cause of popular discontent was the British policy of economically exploiting India. This hurt all sections of society. The peasants suffered due to high revenue demands and the strict revenue collection policy. Artisans and craftsmen were ruined by the large-scale influx of cheap British manufactured goods into India, which in turn made their handmade goods uneconomical to produce. People who made a living by following religious and cultural pursuits lost their source of livelihood due to the withdrawal royal patronage caused by the displacement of the running rules. A corrupt and unresponsible administration added to the miseries of the people. Political factors. The British policy of territorial annexations led to the displacement of a large number of rulers and chiefs. The vigorous application of the policies of subsidiary alliance and doctrine of lapse angered the ruling sections of the society. Rani Laxmi Bai and Nana Sahib became bitter enemies of the British and led the revolt their respective territories. The annexation of Awadh on grounds of misrule was greatly resented. The Nawab of Awadh had been loyal to the British. The annexation was widely seen as a blatant act of backstabbing by the British. It deeply hurt the sentiments of the company's sepoys, before most of them came from Awadh. Moreover, even under the new regime, the people of Awadh got no relief from oppression. Peasants had to pay even higher revenue and additional taxes were imposed. The British provided no alternative source of employment to the people who lost their jobs due to the dissolution of the Nawab's administration. Social factors. The social forms introduced by the British were looked upon with suspicion by the conservative sections of the Indian society. Reforms such as abolition of sati, legalization of widow remarriage, and the extension of Western education to women were looked upon as of interference in the social customs of the country. The social customs of the country The social discriminations faced by the Indian due to the British attitude of racial superiority also led to much resentment. Religious factors. A major cause of the outbreak of the revolt was the fear among the people that the British government was determined to destroy their religion and convert Indians to Christianity. The Indian activities of the Christian missionaries and the actual conversations made by them were taken as a proof of his fear. The policy of taxing lands belonging to temples and mosques lent further support to this idea. The belief that their religion was under threat united all sections of society against a common enemy. Military factors. Indian soldiers formed 7/8 of the total British troop in India. As they were an integral part of Indian society, they too suffered the consequences of the oppressive British rule. Besides, they had other grievances. The Indian sepoys were looked upon an inferior being and treated with contempt by their British officers. They were paid much less than the British soldiers. All avenues of promotion were closed to them as all higher arms posts were reserved for the British. Other factors. There were other specific and more immediate causes for the discontent among the sepoys. The annexation of Awadh inflamed their strong feelings against foreign rule. They were also influenced by the general fear that their religion was in danger. The order that forbade the sepoys from wearing caste and sectarian marks hurt their sentiments deeply. So also acts the 1816 which required the new recruits to travel overseas it needed. The Hindu sepoys resented this as according to the popular Hindu belief, travel across the sea led to a loss of caste. Another cause of sepoy discontent was the withdrawal of the foreign service allowances bhatta which the sepoys were getting for fighting outside the country. Immediate factors. Discontent and resentment against British rule had been growing among the Indian for a long time. By 1857, the state was set for a massive revolt. The spark came from a small thing as a rifle cartridge. At this time, the Enfield rifle was introduced in the army. Its cartridges were covered with a greased paper. This greased cover had to be beaten off before the rifle cartridge be loaded. The news spread that the grease was made of cow and pig fat. Both the Hindus and Muslims refused to use them as the cow is scared to the Hindus and the pig is detestable to the Muslims. Both these communities were enraged at such a blatant attempt to harm their religion. This incident, popularly known as the Greased Cartridge incident, became the immediate cause of the revolt. Thank you. Let's start chapter 5, Crafts and Industries in the Colonial Period. India before the establishment of British rule was a flourishing center of craft and industry. It has been described as the industrial workshop of the world. The cities had workshops or karkhanas where several artisans could work at a place together. The artisans produced various kinds of cloth implements, furniture, jewelry, and vessels that fulfilled the daily needs of the villagers. A unique feature of the village economy was the union of agriculture and handicrafts industry. This means that the family of the peasants undertook weaving and spinning as a part-time activity. The other artisans got their share of crop for their services they provided to the village. They were praised and patronized for their work by the local rulers and landlords. Articles made by the Indian artisans had a market across the world. The main exports in the 17th century were calico, muslin, yarn, raw cotton, raw silk, gold and silver articrafts, jewelry, leather, sugar, rice, indigo, pepper and other spices The value of exports from India far exceeded the value of imports into India. Exports were mainly paid for silver or gold. Industrial dissolution and declines of Indian textile and handicrafts. Popularity of Indian handicrafts and cotton textiles started to decline after the Industrial Revolution. The machine-made textile was cheaper and produced in mass. Handmade products could not compete the machine-made products. Machine-made products were cheaper comparatively. The people started to use the machine-made products, and this led to decline in demand of handicrafts and cotton textile of India. Besides, the colonial government policies supported the British products. After the introduction of railways, British goods could enter the remote and internal areas of India. Actually, the railways spread the demand of British goods. As the power of Indian rulers started to decline, the customers of Indian handicrafts also declined. Actually, the kings were the supporter and users of handicrafts, but with the decline of kings, the importance and demand of handicrafts declined. The ruin of Indian handicrafts were reflected in the destruction of the towns and cities. The popularity of Dhaka, Surat and Murshidabad declined. After decline of handicrafts, more and more people started to divert towards agriculture. Then the pressure on agriculture was heavy. Destruction of Indian handicrafts. The Industrial Revolution brought a revolution in cotton textile production in England. Cotton cloth could be woven at a much faster speed and in huge quantity. Indian textile was costlier as compared to machine-made products. Moreover, when Indian textiles were sent to Britain, a very heavy custom duty was imposed as to discourage their sale in Britain. The result was the place of Indian handmade cloth was taken by the machine-made cloth. Consequences of this process was visible on Indian weavers. Indian weavers were out of work. The weavers of Bengal were worst affected. Indian weavers started to starve. The craftsmen had to leave their ancestral profession. Many adopted farming and hence burdening the agriculture. Indian markets were ruined. Decline of wood steel. High quality steel called woods was produced in South India. Weapons, especially the swords, were made of wood steel and were popular for its quality. Tipu Sultan, the great brave ruler of Mysore, fought 4 wars against the British with his famous sword made of wood steel. The technique of making wood steel was different as iron was mixed with the charcoal. With the coming of British and machine-made iron and steel, the Indian wood steel could not stay for longer. Iron smelting was common in Indian villages, but these furnaces could not compete the machine-made iron. Machine age in India. The impact of Industrial Revolution was reflected when cotton and jute mills and coal mining started. Bombay and Gujarat were the centers of cotton and textile mills. The first textile mill was started in Bombay in 1854 and first jute mill was set up in Bengal in 1855. Indian businessmen got no protection in their own country as the British economic policies supported the British business interest. British businessmen get loan at cheap rate and concessions in railway. Industrial revolutions had to pay higher railway freight charges and to take loan at high interest rate. The iron and steel industries started to take shape when Jamshedji Tata set up Tata Iron and Steel Company Tisco at Jamshedpur in 1907. Commercial coal mining started in India from 1774 in the Raniganj qualified along the western bank of river Damodar. The production was very slow as demand was low. The hold of British-based production was everywhere. Poverty of the people was at its height as sources of income were declining. All the profits were made by the British companies. Dadabhai Naoroji explained the reign of wealth theory in his book Poverty and Un-British Rule in India 1912. India was as its extreme poor condition due to drain of Indian wealth into Britain due to British colonial policy. He held that the British rule in India was like sponge which soaked everything valuable in India and pushed out into Britain. During the First World War, Indian industries started to get support. Britain had to turn to steel produced in Tata Iron and Steel Company or Tisco to construct the railways. The steel produced in Britain was being used to meet the demand of the First World War. The steel for Tisco was also used to produce was materials. Both cotton and textile industries declined due to British colonial policies. Ultimately, the economic policies of colonial period led to the decline of income of Indians and extreme poverty of the Indians. Natural disasters like drought, famines, epidemics, etc. added the sufferings of India. Thank you. Let's start chapter 6. Imperial Rule and Tribal Communities. A tribe is a group of people united by a common name, a common language in which the members take pride. They share a common territory and a common culture. A member of the tribe is known as tribal or Adivasi. India has been home to several tribes like Khonds, Khashis, Santhals, and others whose cultures over the past 2 centuries have undergone a change. Tribals have often been considered outside the mainstream of society due to their different way of life. In spite of their contact with non-tribal groups, they retained their own identity and culture. Most tribes are close to nature. Some tribes own their jointly in name of the tribe. However, their way of life was severely disrupted during British rule. Pastoral tribes, Gujjars and Bakkadwals of Jammu and Kashmir, who moved in search of water and grass along with their cattle. Generally, the pastoral tribes move from place to place with their cattle, sheep, goat, and camel. The pastoralist tribals moved with the seasonal change in search of grass and fodder. Settled tribes. Settled tribes do not move in search of water or fodder. Rather, they lead a settled life. They till the land. The life is based on community life. Land belongs to the community. All the members of the tribe has right over the lands and other resources. The Mundas, Santhals, and Gonds were settled groups. They live in central and eastern India. Shifting cultivation. The tribal groups in northeast part of India follow shifting cultivation or jhum. They lack the modern inputs like fertilizer for the cultivation of crops. After continuous use of land for cultivation, they leave that area and shift to the next area of forest. They cut the trees and burn them. This clear land is utilized for cultivation of crops. The attitude of the company towards this type of cultivation was hostile. The company forced the tribal groups to leave the shifting cultivation as it could cause forest fire on large scale. Besides forest, timber was burnt. Timber was very much valuable for the company. In forest areas, the tribes used herbs for medicine, wood for different items and agricultural tools, bamboo for making fences, baskets and caps. Thus, the forest tribes were totally dependent on forest products. Deforestation and tribal groups. The company needed valuable timber for several reasons. A large-scale cutting of trees led to disturb the pastoral life of the tribal communities. Commercialization of forests. The British started the use of forests for commercial purpose. The best valuable forests were put in the category of reserved forest. The tribals could not enter these forests. They could not take anything from the forests. The British needed teak and sal wood for railway and ship industry and other purposes. The British government passed the Forest Acts. These Forest Acts divided the forest into three categories: reserved, protected, village forests. Impacts of Forest Act. The British government banned shifting cultivation. The result was many tribal groups were displaced. The company put guards and officers. If any guard found any tribal moving in and taking the materials, they could be arrested. Forest Act did not allow their entry into forest for grazing, the cattle, collection of fruits and roots. Tribes were denied to hunt from forest and fishing from rivers and ponds. The life of tribals were affected. Restriction on the movement of tribals with the cattle led to the declining of quantity pastoral land. Ultimately, it has bad effect on cattle. Pastoral tribes had to pay tax for animal grazing. This was burden on the poor tribes. The British were suspicious of the nomadic tribes. They were considered to be uncivilized criminals. In 1871, British government passed the Criminal Tribes Act that specified nomadic tribes could live only in notified village settlement. They were not allowed to move out without a permit. The village police kept watching them. As the tribals lost their traditional rights over the forest, many of them were forced to work in mines, fields, and plantations. Mostly they were given very low wages and were treated as bonded laborers. Forest laws banned hunting by tribes. The British officers hunted themselves and awarded the British hunters for killing the wildlife. Tribals revolt. Due to above mentioned factors, the tribals started revolting against the British. Folk songs, folk tales of the tribal communities glorified their achievements when they revolted against the British. Santhal Revolt. The Santhals revolted between 1855 to 57. They were settled cultivators in Bihar and Odisha region. They were not owners of land. They were tenants of the zamindars who took rent. This led to borrowing of money from moneylenders and they were trapped in debt. They attacked the moneylenders, police, courts, officials and the landlords. They killed many British officers and local moneylenders. The British suppressed the tribal revolt but assured them some concessions. Munda Revolt. The Mundas lived in Bihar region. The revolt took place in 1899 to 1900. The Munda tribe attacked British officials, Christian missionaries, and moneylenders, policemen. They wanted back their lands when they cultivated their land. They wanted to be free from the control of zamindars and moneylenders. They looted the British houses and officers. There was no match between the struggle. The British had modern weapons and army. Tribals had traditional weapons. Birsa Munda was the leader of Munda tribal revolt. He wanted back the forest and lands of the tribal and freedom from all injustice and oppression. His aim was to set up Munda Raj. The Munda attacked police station, landlord and looted the property of moneylenders. The tribals believed in magic powers of Birsa Munda. The revolt was suppressed, but government assured the tribals for their traditional rights. Tribe revolt in any India. Similarly, the Nagas revolted against the British in 1849, but they were suppressed. In Assam, the Khasis revolted against the British. Khasis were revolting against the construction of road in their area. Another tribe, Kukis in Manipur, attacked the British territories and finally they had to surrender in 1850. Similarly, the Khonds had revolted against the British. It shows that simple innocent tribal people had to suffer due to the oppressive British policies and forced them to raise against the British rule, though they were suppressed brutally by the British, but the feeling of independence lightened the spirit of freedom. Manipur. Manipur was the under control of a royal family during the 19th century. After the death of King Chandra Kirti Singh in 1886, his eldest son Surchandra Singh succeeded to the throne of Manipur, but he was overthrown by Prince Tikendrajit and his allies. Surendra has then sought the British help to regain his lost power. They declared war against Manipur in 1891. The Manipuris under Tikendrajit fought bravely, however, they were not defeated, and Tikendrajit was hanged by the British. A commemorative monument named by the B. Tikendrajit Memorial stands at the spot where he hanged. The British period saw many other revolts by the tribals who were struggling against displacement from their traditional lands and lifestyles. None of these revolts succeeded, but they certainly exposed the fact that the British colonial rule was based on exploitation and thrived on the support of Besaid's rule and regulations. After independence, the government initiated many steps to improve the lot of the tribals. It took steps to conserve the unique tribal culture and way of life. Thank you.